Hi, I'm Dr. Randy Bach. I'm the president of the Newton Taxpayers Association. And if you're in Newton, you're probably a Newton taxpayer. You can be part of our association. We'd love to have you. Find us on Facebook, and if you give us money, we'll have a web page and so forth. But we are the people who help keep the taxes within check and keep our city managers hopefully managing your interests as well as their own. I'm honored tonight to have with us Henry Barbaro, who is an environmental scientist and worked for the state of Massachusetts, the beast as we know it. Just kidding. And he's here to talk, segue a little bit, as the head of the Massachusetts Council for Immigration Reform, something like that.
Very close.
Very close. And he'll tell us. Coalition, there you go. And we want to talk a bit about how Massachusetts is doing in regard to that thing called immigration. And if you were awake the last few months, you might have noticed it factor into the last previous election and the Grover Clevelandization of Donald Trump into his second non-sequential term. So for more non-sequential terms, or inconsequential, we can keep me quiet and move to the consequential terms of Henry Barbaro. So Henry, tell us a little bit about what is going on with, say, Newton for immigration, and how does this affect us here and or in the state, Commonwealth of Massachusetts? And what is the difference between the state and the Commonwealth anyway? But that's another topic.
Yeah, not totally sure. It's, but anyhow, my name is Henry Barbaro, and I'm the executive director of the Massachusetts Coalition for Immigration Reform. And MCIR, we call it, and MCIR is all about raising public awareness about the problems with mass immigration, especially illegal immigration. So, do you want me to talk about Newton itself, or just the state? Okay, let's do the state.
Stick with your strong points. We can come back to Newton later.
Very good.
I know you prepped here, and you've got some
pardon
things.
me. I'm going to try not to read, but I am going to refer to my notes a little bit. Anyway, the problem statement here is that Massachusetts literally has a migrant crisis. In August of 2023, Governor Healy declared a state of emergency because the state's shelter system was being overwhelmed. It still is. And so what this means, aside from that, is that the state is paying out approximately $1 billion per year in this sort of hopeless effort to support all the illegal migrants that have been flooding into the state. And on top of that, there's an estimate is that there's approximately $3 billion additional dollars being spent by mostly municipalities for schools and health care and welfare and police protection, that sort of thing. So as background, by the way, and there is no end in sight. I mean, this isn't just a temporary thing. Of course, President Trump will change the trajectory here, but in terms of migrants wanting to come to Massachusetts, there is no limit. There's no limit.
I would think it's kind of, we've become a little bit of like a honeypot, attractant to illegal immigration, especially after the Trump election, because there are certain states that are doubling down on the Democrat part. So they are making themselves extra super duper sanctuary states. And I think in regard to certain federal law, like with the abortion Dodd decision, states individually could decide whether they wanted to keep abortion legal or not. I don't think this falls into the same category and rubric where people have that same right, because this is a kind of a defense aspect, and it's a national border. The United States of America were individual states at initiation. They were considered countries essentially, and that's colonies, but they formed together and amalgamated as the United States of America. And then basically the concept was to organize the defense of the border, and this is in a sense a border issue because there are illegal immigration to the country. It's not by state. Right. But even so, however you want to parse this, I don't think states have the right to do this kind of thing state by state. So am I wrong about that?
No, you're not wrong. You hear over and over, at least when the Biden administration was here, that, oh, we can't do anything about this because it's a federal issue. So now that it becomes a federal issue under Trump, then now they're saying, well, we want to do something about it. So you really can't have it both ways.
Yeah.
But I wanted to give just a little bit of background. Right now, there's approximately 355,000 illegal migrants in Massachusetts, and about 50,000 of those have arrived since 2021. And again, as I was saying, excuse me, there's about $1 billion a year that's being paid for tax dollars in temporary housing as well as boarding, things like clothing and food. And the problem is that the problem with, well, why this is such an impact on tax dollars is because illegal migrants tend to be low-skilled, low-educated, and they don't have the same self-sufficiency as, let's say, a native-born American, and so they statistically rely on welfare programs significantly more than Americans do.
Yeah.
So why is this happening now? There are three reasons. The big reason is you have the Biden administration, and what they did is that they executed these variety of executive orders, and they flouted a variety of immigration laws, and they basically adopted what I would call open borders policies. And so, again, the numbers are kind of not well tracked, but there's an estimate that under Biden administration, anywhere between 6 million and 12 million illegal migrants have entered and are now living in the country.
I think that probably number is low. I think I would bet the 350,000 Massachusetts is on the low end as well. Henry was kind enough to bring in a book by
Todd Bensman.
Maybe we can show it here. Overrun. I had him on my show. If people want to find randybach.com, they can find my interview with him about a year and a half ago. Covers the story really well. But the fact of the matter is, we have laws. If people want an open border, they should vote for it. But that is kind of what didn't happen. I think it's also an abrogation of duty to have the federal government just flout, as you said, the federal law and let and open the borders. And this comes at a cost. I mean, there was this, I guess, Martha Raddatz interview recently with J.D. Vance during the election. He was pointing out the Venezuelan gangs taking over the apartment complex in Aurora, Colorado. Try to say that 3 times fast, Aurora. Anyway, it's not to say that thing couldn't happen here. There's no reason. There's nothing special. I mean, Aurora is just kind of a Denver suburb, if I'm not mistaken, and there's no reason that can't happen here. And she said it was just a handful of apartment complexes. Well, if it's your apartment complex, and it shouldn't be any apartment complex. And it's like, it's not as if, as Donald Trump said in 2016, it's not as if they're sending their best people here.
Right.
I've been to Mexico, and I've been to Mexico City and many other cities in Mexico, and people are wonderful. But those that are fully integrated in society don't have a rationale and a reason to abscond. A lot of times it is, odds are, people who are not able to cope in their own society and potentially with criminal past who want to do something new. So you're going to get, on average, more criminals and probably a lower end of those societies themselves coming here. And so on top of the natural basis where they're not knowing the language such as we have here, they're also kind of on the low end. If you do want people to come in, you just want immigration for whatever reason, numbers and whatnot.
I have reasons.
Yeah, then there are visa programs, and again, most of the preponderance of the kind of force for open borders and whatnot come from our college campuses, I think. A lot of academics and so forth. But the college campuses themselves never have an open border policy. If I showed up tomorrow, take classes, like I'm here, take classes, like you didn't enroll, you're not paying, get out, and the campus police would take me off. They don't have open borders at Harvard. If you want to be at Harvard, you have to have an ID, you have to be, stamped and so forth, pass their rules, and that's why you get to be at Harvard. I don't see why Harvard gets to do that, or MIT, or any other number of colleges, and the country as a whole, gets kind of shunted aside as if somehow your town is not worth it. That Springfield, Ohio, or whatever, is not worth it. They have, a town pretty much the same size as Newton, 60,000 people at the time, and the word is, I think, 20,000 Haitian immigrants. And that's
something like that. I think it was a town of 40,000, and then it swelled an additional 20,000.
Yeah, how does one absorb that? I mean, Harvard never had to absorb it. If they have, I don't know, 20,000 people on campus, or whatever the number is, there's no reason, or no way they would kind of take on 5,000, Haitian immigrants kind of hanging out at Harvard. Well, but somehow those areas are sacrosanct, but your areas are not.
Well, let me, I did just try to tailor this to tax dollars and so forth, but you do bring up an interesting issue that I think people, if you will allow me to digress a bit, but people get this crime thing, I think, confused. They say, well, hey, immigrants, migrants, they are no more statistically likely to commit crimes than Americans. And, I've heard people argue either way, but that's really not the issue. To me, the point is that these people are not being properly vetted, and we are importing a criminal element. Now, maybe it's a small percentage, but just one criminal
why have any?
Is right. I mean, the purpose of immigration is to strengthen and improve our country rather than bring in people who are going to prey on our citizens. Yeah. So that I just wanted to clarify that little point. But I'd like to just go on. Why is it happening now? There are three reasons. I talked about the Biden administration. The other one is, as Randy was saying, I forget the term you used, but we call them magnets. Massachusetts has magnets for illegal immigration. And that has to do, first and foremost, is there's a labor market for illegal workers. And that magnet needs to be shut off. I mean, that's the primary one. There are also other ones like right to shelter, in-state tuition, driver's licenses, welfare, health care. The third reason is, and it has to do with this book. Todd Bensman, I went to one of his talks, and he talked about the migrant advocacy industrial complex.
Yeah.
Great term. It's all about the NGOs that are being paid by federal tax dollars to facilitate illegal immigration to come into the country, and
that's kind of a regulatory capture cycle that happens with government. I think we saw this during COVID. The vaccine manufacturers oftentimes have captured the regulators because when they're done being head of the FDA, they get a job at Pfizer. They're on the board or whatever, and they get kind of easy money. They get lectures and so forth. So there's kind of a circuit where one hand helps the other. With these NGOs, there's I think definitely what you're talking about. We see this in many different fields where the NGOs are getting basically federal money, and then when people leave the federal government, they can be working for the NGOs. But this is kind of like a washing of money. And
it is. It's like money laundering.
I think there's an aspect where things are skimmed. I mean, I'm not a conspiracy theory, or at least a deep one, but you should listen to Jeffrey Sachs as an economics professor. And I'm of the right, sort of, and he's of the left. And so we don't agree necessarily on a lot of things, but he points out that a fair amount of the Ukraine war apparatus money goes towards other things. When you donate to the United Way, $100.
That's one of them. Yes.
Like $5 winds up doing that thing. You donate to Salvation Army, like 95% of your money kind of goes to that thing, helping somebody. But a lot of these other charities have structures where everyone's kind of getting wealthy. The head of United Way might be getting $1 million. Whatnot.
It's big money in this.
Yeah, and
absolutely.
so this kind of this NGO complex, and it factors in with policy. So the policy goes to favor the NGOs. The money goes to the NGOs, and I don't think you have to be a deep conspiracist to think that some of that money is going back to the people who helped facilitate it, either now or later in book deals and whatnot. There's a lot of stuff that happens that's sort of just right beneath the surface. And again, I don't think it's deep conspiracy to point out that there are a lot of NGOs making money off of you. And this is, again, kind of points to where your taxpayer dollars go that are not necessarily for those effective things that you actually need, like here, trash removal and whatnot. A lot of money goes for other interests based on political concepts.
Okay, so very good. Let me talk about why I titled this, "Why is it bad to spend tax dollars to support an endless flow of migrants?" Okay, and I have four reasons. One is that Massachusetts is number 2 in terms of out-migration. You know, the word migration. Number 1 is California. And these are relatively high tax-paying people who are moving out. So it's kind of the worst of both worlds, where the taxpayers are moving out and the ones moving in are the ones that are tax deficit, that require tax dollars. So either tax rates are going to have to go up, or Massachusetts will ultimately go bankrupt. So, but either way, this is entirely, what's going on now is entirely unsustainable. Okay, so that's number 1. Second one is that where you have to choose, you have to make your best choices. And so if money goes to, a lot of money goes to illegal immigrants, migrants, then there's something money is not going toward. And we're talking environmental programs, social programs, and you know, veterans services, that sort of thing. Schools. And I have a great example for that, but we'll see how much time I have, and I can go back to that. Third very important reason is that migrants are displacing American workers, and they are driving down wages for the most vulnerable Americans. And honestly, that includes Black Americans. So this is another problem. And the last one is this. Oh, I just want to mention that Massachusetts has had the highest rise in illegal workers over the 20-year period between 2007 and 2017. Anyhow, the fourth one is just sort of a quality of life issue for Massachusetts residents. You know, our schools are getting more crowded. They're getting more expensive with all these ESL teachers. There are higher housing costs, less open space, more crowding, more traffic congestion, and that sort of thing. No. And the irony here is that Massachusetts already is the 3rd most densely populated state in the country. So if I can keep going, then how is this possible politically? You know, it seems like it's not a good idea. It's certainly not sustainable. So why? Why is it happening? Well, there are 3 reasons. One is cheap labor. Almost all businesses work to minimize their labor costs. And one thing I've learned on the way is that this kind of proverb, privatize profits, socialize costs. And this is why we have labor laws and environmental laws. It's to tamp down and check the profit motive. So again, that's kind of what immigration laws function as, is to check that desire for importing cheap labor. Second reason, it's kind of simple. Immigrants are about twice as likely to vote Democrat as they are Republican. So again, you can connect the dots there a little bit. And the last one is that and this is important, especially in a city like Newton, is it's considered to be virtuous to support the downtrodden illegal migrant. A couple of things about that. One is that these people are not considering these vulnerable Americans that are suffering also.
Yeah, and I think you make an excellent point there. You know, this is an expression, I'm not sure who wrote it, but it's when liberal pieties collide. So you want this and you also want that. And the two might be inimical with each other. So in this case, I think you're bringing up an excellent point. People want to help the helpless and so forth. But those people, and I saw this in New York City, but my understanding from Henry is it also is happening here in Roxbury, that in New York City there was a community center in a predominantly Black or poor neighborhood that was just taken away from the community. It's no longer a community center. It's basically a homeless shelter for illegal immigrants, and they're just nonstop. And the more, the unfortunate aspect is the more of that you do, the more of that you get. And especially if you, in these times when many states are going to be clamping down on immigration, enforcement, that there's going to be a double magnet effect. So whatever you've seen so far may only just be, part one. Wait for part deux, to come around, and it's going to be even worse. And so, the economist Herb Stein, who was actually Ben Stein's father, back in the Nixon era, he said that which can't continue doesn't. It's not really deep. It's not deep philosophy. Margaret Thatcher said, so the problem with socialism is eventually you run out of other people's money. Both of these things are unsustainable. Detroit was the single wealthiest city practically on earth in 1964 or so. And then it's, of course, not. There's no reason to think that a wealthy place like Massachusetts is always going to stay that way. We have benefited from huge financial largesse to the research institutions and so forth, like Harvard, MIT, and whatnot. And that is not necessarily going to continue. And Massachusetts had the ability to have this kind of noblesse oblige, this kind of wealth thing, the kind of the ability to finance virtue signaling. That you're going to favor everybody and so forth simultaneously. They have that through the wealth of the state, and that is not, again, largely based on a fair amount of federal research money going to the hospitals and whatnot. There's obviously tech community and so forth, but those are not the people that are going to be coming over here helping. That is to say, the kind of lower literacy people, they're not going to be running in and running a tech startup tomorrow,
right,
and whatnot. So you have to kind of figure out how much you can do of this, and you have to decide where you want your charity dollar spent, and it is finite. Right. And that's the problem we have here at Newton Taxpayers, all that kind of stuff, that the city wants to do everything, and they can't figure out which one they want to do.
Yeah, you got to choose.
You got to make up your mind. You got to pick a lane.
Okay,
so how are we going to pick a lane here, and how can we get? I'm not saying we can elect Republicans in Massachusetts, although we have, Weld and Cellucci and Romney and Baker and whatnot, but a certain type of Republican. And can we make the current administration listen more? And I think we can if we get people to galvanize around some of these concepts. So what would be your call to action for people listening?
Okay, how many more minutes do I have, by the way?
About 5, probably.
Okay, awesome. Let me just wrap this up, this part, and then I'll get into recommendations. And I just want to say, too, that as Randy was saying, make no mistake, Massachusetts is incentivizing illegal immigration to the state. Okay, so that's there's no two ways about it. But I just wanted to point, that's kind of in this virtue thing. We've all heard these terms, we are a nation of immigrants. Your ancestors were immigrants. Immigrants built our country. No person is illegal. And the way I interpret that is that these are dog whistles for people who are against enforcement of immigration law and are promoting essentially an open borders policy for the country. So these statements, they go nowhere, and that's really where they lead to if they go anywhere. So then as far as recommendations go, I have 4. First one is to cut off the jobs market for illegal labor. Now there's a bill that's going to be introduced very soon. It's called the E-Verify bill by Representative David DeCoste.
Is that for the federal?
This would be state.
Okay.
Okay. And the idea is it's a very easy program to use. Florida uses it and 19 other states or something.
Does it have a chance of passing here?
Well, I don't know. I mean, there isn't a really good argument against it.
Well, that doesn't necessarily mean anything. I'm just going to interject. I apologize for interrupting.
Sure.
I want to point out 2 things. First of all, I think we left out one determinant of why immigration is so kind of illegal immigration is so welcome. That's the census. In order to determine members of Congress state by state, they go not based on number of citizens, but number of people who happen to be there. So if California can bloat its number, it's basically number of people hanging out in California, whether legal or illegal, they get to maintain that certain number of Congress critters that they have. And so California has had a net loss in citizens and of the kind of an intellectual brain drain going to Texas, for instance, at lower taxes and whatnot, freer government. But they're not necessarily going to lose a number of people based on the census because they're keeping illegals. So it's kind of like, if you're building a poker hand, the winning hand doesn't matter, it's just as long as you have more cards. So they're kind of picking up cards where they can.
Nice.
And the second point, that when you go to the airport, in and out of the country or between states, you have to go through screening. There's a no-fly list. I mean, at one point, Tulsi Gabbard was on it, so it's kind of an absurd thing. But the fact of the matter is that we understand there are good actors and bad actors getting on an airplane. An airplane is a cohesive thing. Everyone has to kind of literally be going the same direction with the same intent. That you don't want to kill the pilot, you don't want to hijack the plane. All that kind of stuff. We all have the same goal. In order to do that, we have to filter people out. And yet, if you were that malfeasant type of individual who wanted to do that kind of thing, then what you're going to do is come across the border. You're just going to like fly to Guadalajara or someplace and then kind of filter up, trickle up, through Laredo or whatever. And that's kind of like a weird kind of thing to make us go through all this grief to get on an airplane or get in the country. You have to show papers and passports. And if you are, some guy, from Al-Qaeda, ISIS, whatever, and you feel like, I don't know, doing stuff, all you have to do is, show up in Mexico and even Canada, and then here you are. I mean, it just doesn't seem to make any sense if you're going to have border control at certain places, ports and airports, not to have it on the border. I don't see why you would do that. Again, Harvard doesn't do this. If I want to get into Harvard tomorrow, I have to like show something, get a card, an ID, it's going to expire, so forth. If I want to get into Cambridge Innovation Center, you get an ID card, you get, you have to kind of give your life story, and we have life stories, and some of our life stories, some of the lives with those stories are not necessarily those you want to have as company with your kids and your children and whatnot.
Okay, let me wrap up as best I can. So E-Verify is a system, it's a computerized system, and it almost instantaneously determines if the prospective employee is authorized to work in America. And so if Massachusetts has this system, it will really discourage illegal workers. Because they will no longer use fraudulent or stolen identification. Number two, our leaders need to make smart decisions, and just as a quick phrase, they cannot have social programs and mass immigration at the same time. Right. Those two do not mix. Third, amend the right to shelter law and limit this law to U.S. citizens and legal residents rather than, it was passed in 1983, it was never designed for a flood of illegal migrants. And the last one has to do with the NGOs. These NGOs sponsor the migrants to come to Massachusetts, but then they cut them free. And what they should do is be required to provide shelter and welfare and health insurance and all these other benefits.
They should actually just put them in Martha's Vineyard. If you remember that episode?
Oh, yeah.
So this is a great story. I think it was the governors of Florida and Texas. They were getting inundated, which is another word for flooded, actually, with illegals, and so they put them on a bus, maybe an airplane, and they popped them over to Martha's Vineyard in Nantucket.
Yes.
I think it was Martha's Vineyard, but everyone
that was
like,
DeSantis, I think.
Yeah, but everyone's like, oh my God, we love you guys, and they have all these great videos back at the time, I think a year and a half ago. We love you, but they put them on a bus as soon as they possibly, a ferry, and boom, got them out of there.
Yeah, they went to a military base.
This is kind of a NIMBY thing, not in my backyard,
yeah.
Not in my home. So most people who are able to do this virtue signaling, they have enough fence around them, like the Nancy Pelosi estate and whatnot. The people who have this, the Pope, as a matter of fact, lives behind a bunch of walls, is like, doesn't want you to have a wall. So I think this kind of comes to a populist moment where the people have some determination about what they want, and they want kind of the same kind of things that everybody else wants, which is some sanity and some safety. In order to do that, you have to kind of let things settle down a little bit, not have constant flux and constant change. Yeah. Last words, 30 seconds.
Okay. We have a website. It's humble, and we're developing it. We're on a growth curve. And it's masscir.com is our website. And we also have a Facebook page with a similar name. And I really appreciate being on the show and Randy having me as a guest. And this is a very rich subject, and certainly could make for future shows as well.
Well, thank you so much, Henry. And thank you, Newton, for having us. Thank you, Newton TV, and our wonderful producers, Sandy and Aura and Becca. And so it's been wonderful being here, and support us at Newton Taxpayer Association so we can carry on the work that needs to be done to kind of protect you from some of the people who maybe don't have your interests quite at heart.